to my millions of fans.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of #Badge Chat Show and Tell. This is a special edition for me, joined live in the flesh by Doug Belshaw, everybody. You can follow him on Twitter at DAJ Belshaw. These days, did I get that wrong?
No, that's fine. I was going to say, and on Mastodon.
I was about to say, these days, Mastodon, which you're going to have to explain. I read it, I don't get it.
So Mastodon is like a decentralized Twitter, which is important for some of the stuff I'm doing with Moodle, hence the Moodle t-shirt. I'm here in Denver with you, doing some stuff around Moodle Moots, which are kind of conferences around the world. It's a decentralized version of Twitter. You can get me on there at mastodon.social. Mastodon, like the extinct woolly mammoth. A mastodon was an extinct woolly mammoth. Mastodon.social /@DAJ Belshaw.
Perfect. And you also, my understanding is you kind of almost like Slack and other communities in Mastodon, you sort of choose a main channel through which to engage with your people.
Have you seen TweetDeck or Hootsuite or anything like that before?
Yeah.
Right, so it's like that in the sense that, so it's almost exactly the same as the TweetDeck interface. So you get your home and your replies, your direct messages and stuff. The difference is that anyone can set up their own server. So there's loads of different servers. So, like, let's say that you start getting some abuse on Twitter, and you might just decide, I'm going to quit Twitter. I'm not going to be on Twitter anymore. Well, that's the binary option you've got on Facebook and Twitter and stuff. It's a centralized service, but decentralized services, you can just move to a different one. So I actually moved to a different one earlier this year. We'll not talk about that now because
that was actually where that question came from. So I'm like, DAJ Belshaw, I thought you had a different server you were promoting yourself, but I'm a little behind the times.
There is a blog post which explains that, as you've been supposed to know. So I've got several blogs. One of them is discourses. So if you take the word discourses and then put a dot before the ES, as in the Spanish domain, so discourses, and scroll down a bit, it tells you why I left social.co, which is a cooperatively run instance of Mastodon.
Awesome. Like you said, we're here for other. The thing that folks, if you haven't met Doug, don't know yet is that pretty much he's a human parlor game. Name the topic, and he's going to fascinate you endlessly. But for this afternoon, we're going to be fascinated around digital badge credentials.
Okay.
And for folks who aren't familiar with Doug's work, he is truly OG from the earliest days of this work, and has been involved in some of the most powerful, most exciting stuff, and probably a few things that also have faltered as well.
Absolutely.
You probably have run the gamut.
No, I think that's important to say as well. So first got involved in badges in 2011 when I saw the initial pilot with the Wealth Foundation. Joined Mozilla to be on the badges team from 2012 to 2014. Then worked on web literacy, became consultant, server co-op, and I'm now leading a new project for Moodle called MoodleNet. And of course, Moodle has badges in core. And since I joined, I've been pushing for version 2 of the specification to be part of that. And that should be landing in version 3.6 next month. If it misses that deadline, it'll be in 3.7 next year.
Perfect. And when we get live, people will know if they want to tweet in their questions, #badge chat. We'll definitely get those live on the air for Doug. Doug, it's a real treat for me to talk badges because I think we're for me, at least on the US side of things, there's this sense that we've crossed the threshold where will this teeter between potential flavor of the week, or is this on the path towards ubiquity? And it really feels like we're now past that even though there's still a huge segment of the population to educate and bring on board and culturize around this, we are now on the path to ubiquity. Right. And for somebody like you who's been in this space for 7 years now, was there sort of a moment for you where you started to feel that?
Right. So I always said that this was going to be a 10-year thing. I can remember being 16 in 1997, so you can work out how old I am. So 16, and I found out about Bluetooth, and Bluetooth had just been announced as a new standard. And my mind was blown, a bit like with open badges. But if you think about it, it took 10 full years for me to go, oh, hey, Noah, can you turn Bluetooth on your phone and just send me something? That took 10 full years to work. So I always thought it was going to be a similar kind of thing with the Gartner hype cycle and everything with open badges. And I still think, there's different amounts of adoption around the world. I do think in the US, because of the funding, because of the traction, because of different people taking on badges in different situations, I do think that the US is more advanced in terms of micro-credentials than Europe. But the really interesting thing...
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I just got to hold my breath there for a second. Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing which is really interesting is that for me as a European, although post-Brexit, can I still call myself that?
You can still call yourself that for a few more minutes.
Okay. I did not.
You were in Denver when that vote happened, weren't you?
2016. Yes,
actually, we were discussing a few blocks from here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I did not vote for Brexit. So what was I saying? So education is different, the same and different in Europe as it is here. There's a lot more of an apprenticeship model, I would say, in Europe still, where like we don't talk about rubrics and all that kind of stuff in the UK and in Europe, whereas in the US it's very much focused on that. So what's happened in the US, as far as I can see as an outside observer, is that you've got competency-based education coming in, and project-based learning and that kind of stuff as a new thing, which in Europe is not so much a new thing. And then badges have come along and just kind of gone hand in glove pretty much with that.
Okay.
Versus,
absolutely. And what about in Europe?
Well, I think in Europe you've got a different situation where in some places, like in the UK, we're actually moving more towards US model. We've got I could go on a length about the education system in the UK, but we're kind of drifting to the right, I guess, as everyone is in kind of populist voting countries. But it's interesting if you look at Scandinavia and Finland and places like that. You've got organisations like Open Badge Factory, who, if you look at their badging platform, is more like Moodle compared to Credly, for example. Whereas in Credly, you go in and you can just quickly issue badges based on competency assessments and all that kind of stuff. Whereas in other ones, mainly the European ones, it's more like thinking about how that augments skills and how the more holistic view of the learner, I guess. I had a conversation just this morning at the Moodle Moot with somebody about blockchain-based micro-credentials as well, and just why we would want to go all in with high-stakes versions of credentials as opposed to kind of make them wider. The reason I went into badges wasn't because, I've got a doctorate. It wasn't because I thought everyone should have ever more high stakes credentials. It's because I wanted to know Noah in all of his glory. I want to know all the different parts of your personality to make a more rounded judgment if I was going to hire you, or, if I want to know about you, rather than like, well, I can absolutely trust that Noah got this one credential from this one place.
That's such an interesting thing, because I'm definitely kindred spirit. For me, it's all about that, just this deeper, richer narrative of who we are as learners and achievers. And do you sense a mutual exclusivity between that and the trust? And because I do see, while I'm not passionate about those, blockchain and the trust-based kind of thing, I also see where when we have more and more credentials for which there's a real value proposition for which people might be inclined to cheat, that trust does come into play, and that seems like a pretty good scratch for that itch.
Right, so a couple of things. First of all, just to say that MIT have got this thing called block certs, which you'll be aware of. Block certs, if you issue a block cert, you're also issuing an open badge because it's compatible with the specification. And I know that the guys at Concentric Sky, especially Nate Otto, who I met at the Mozilla Festival the weekend, they have done a great job in making sure that those two standards are compatible, which is fantastic.
And real quick, for anybody who's watching this and wants to learn more about block certs, you can check out at Learning Machine is definitely involved in the block certs, and they're pretty active in blogging and talking about it.
And blockcerts.org is just you can go straight
blockcerts.org. Chris Jiggers, I think, is.
Oh, I don't know. I did a lot of research into this, and also I know Audrey Waters did as well. And my concern is that the whole point of open badges initially was to make learning more empowering for the learner, to put them more in control. And my concern is that a lot of the conversations recently, you've got, I forgot what the new name is, the credential engine, is it? They're trying to do equivalencies. And I can see the rationale for that. I can see why you'd want to say, is this badge equal to this one? And can I absolutely trust that this badge was issued by this institution? But really, the infrastructure that Open Badges is built on was initially built by Mozilla, who built Firefox, and do all that kind of privacy stuff. And it's using the same kind of encryption technologies as you trust every day from your bank. And I don't see why we need to put stuff on a public ledger. And I think actually, so if you don't know much about blockchain technologies and you're watching this, I'm not going to go into it now, but basically you're writing stuff onto a ledger. And if you've ever seen those little Russian dolls that go inside one another, it's a bit like that.
It's an interesting analogy. I like it.
Yeah, in the sense that every next link on the chain basically puts $1 inside the next one. Yeah, so you can't break that link. It's a Matroska dolls to infinity, and so that's immutable. And as in, you can't change it after the fact. And you might think, well, that's exactly what I want to do with some kind of high stakes credential. But I think it leads to potentially consequences that we haven't thought through yet. So there might be some times when you don't want to show your credential, but because it's on the blockchain, someone can actually see that you've done it. Now, there might be ways around that, but I just think that we're going down. There's nothing particularly wrong with doing it. I just think that it's the wrong question to ask. Yeah? The question isn't, how can we make a credential ever more trustworthy? The question is, how can we show all of people's learning and all of the kind of stuff that they're about more holistically? And if we can do that right, then we can make better hiring decisions, and we can make better decisions about who we want to form teams with and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. Where's the meaning in it? Right. And for folks who are joining live, we're with Doug Belshaw, who's in town with the Moodle conference. And if you have questions, you can tweet them in using hashtag badge.chat. I'll be sure to refresh the page so that Doug and I see those questions and we can converse about those for you.
I think we should say what space we're in here, because people might be wondering what's on the board behind us.
We are at INWORKS, INWORKS, which is part of UC Denver, University of Colorado Denver in downtown Denver. And the INWORKS space, you can Google it right now and probably learn a lot more than what I'll say just off the cuff on this broadcast. But it's an amazing prototyping space with everything from CNC mills to circuitry, sewing, and Internet of Things. It's really this amazing place.
Amazing.
Yeah, really great space that with Doug and I were walking down the street, and I said, let's pop in here and record and then take a tour afterwards.
Because obviously, everybody in Denver, so Noah just walks in going, oh, hey, 3 minutes later, we're broadcasting live.
Yeah, way too much credit there. So, one of the things I hear you saying there is so that it's not necessarily that they're mutually exclusive. It's that, if we're drawn to the sex appeal of that trust piece, there might be consequences that take us down a road that pulls us away from the meaningfulness that really is what's driving the passion behind all this work anyway.
So if the answer is blockchain credentials, what's the question, is what I'm saying. Is the question the right kind of question to be asking? So there's that. And yeah, I just think that we need to have a more holistic view of stuff. One thing I did want to bring up for people who might be watching this is, I don't know if you've seen that there's been some work within the community, some questions, etc., on patents that Credly now have around digital credentials.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody wants to do some extra reading outside of this, you can look at Carrie Lemoy's blog post from October 9th on medium.com.
But I think she's going to follow up soon. I think there's going to be a statement from IMS and from Credly. So very, very quickly, we've been aware of these patents. There are a couple of patents around digital credentials, which are
the same thing as patents. Sorry, for a second, I was like, what's it? Oh, yeah, sorry. On this side, we call them patents.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. Sorry
patents. Okay. If you're watching in Europe, you know what I mean. So there've been these patents and they've been now being granted to Credly, and these are on top of one which was granted to Salesforce a few years ago. Now the Salesforce one was a very specific one, so it didn't really affect you or me or anyone who's issuing badges. But what happened? Credly acquired Pearson's Acclaim platform. Now, I'm sure, as most people know, I was not the biggest fan of Pearson in general, and certainly their Acclaim platform, which was locking people in and wasn't letting them export their badges. Pearson submitted for 2 patents to the US.
There's no right or wrong, tomato. You can say patent. I just was clarifying for
right, I'm just correcting myself. Anyway, they submitted, and the community put together some counter evidence, etc. And we didn't talk about this a lot within the community, those who've been around for a while, because it's one of those things where until you found the final resolution of it, it basically scares the horses. It puts people off from doing stuff. But if I can just say to those who are watching, either live or the recording, that what has happened is that Credly came onto a call for the Open Recognition Alliance. Their lawyer came on, along with Mark from IMS Global, who looks after the standard. And they said that basically they're going to grant a RAND It's a RAND agreement. It's basically saying that they will give, although they're the patent holder, they are going to give an agreement to anybody who wants one to be able to use the standard, and they will not sue them. And basically, they've got these patents as a defensive measure in case patent trolls come into the system and start suing credibly. So it's a defensive patent. Now, we want further assurances. We've asked for a statement. I've seen a draft of that statement, and it looks like everything will be fine. But just to say, if you do see anything about Credibly's patents, you don't need to be concerned about that, and you don't need to worry that you're going to get sued as an institution or individual. Everything will be fine.
What breaking news here on hashtag badge chat. That's really good, because for some folks who are super in the weeds, that has been definitely making the rounds. So that's good to know. And for those of you who are watching live and just joined us, this is Doug Belshaw, and you can tweet your questions live into Doug. He'll be live with us for another 15 minutes. Hashtag badge chat, we're checking that. So Doug, you spoke about the difference between the US and what you're seeing in Europe. And at the same time, I from afar really admire some of what I'm seeing in Europe, especially around like the skills and apprenticeships work, and this real connection between job seekers, I guess, and where this is going. So can you just help us who are kind of viewing that from afar? Where is some of that work, like the cities and guilds work?
Yeah.
So, where does that stand, and what are some of the takeaways that are exciting, and/or just lessons learned from scraped up knees and bruises?
Absolutely, nicely put. So city and guilds. If I mention city and guilds in the UK, everybody knows what I'm talking about. They're a 140-year-old institution, I would say. If you hire a plumber or an electrician, you will ask for their city and guilds qualification, because it's seen as the vocational kind of qualification. So when I left Mozilla, I did all of my first 6 months of consultancy work was with City and Guilds, and they actually acquired a platform which some of you will know, which is Digital Me. Digital Me have now basically got rid of their platform and are now a Credly reseller, which is for better or for worse. And I actually met up with Tim Richards from Digital Me at the Mozilla Festival. He's the CEO. In terms of the things I've seen exactly what you've said there in terms of badges being used in the UK to very much try and make much more of a pathway for young people going into work. So that might be around so-called soft skills. I don't like the terminology there, but no, you've got lots of this. You've got, in terms of being a people person, getting out there. You haven't got any qualifications in, being able to blag your way into a makerspace and get yourself on YouTube Live within 5 minutes. But if there was a badge for
Let's badge that.
You would definitely have that kind of thing. And so there's been all kinds of organizations. I'm sure in the US you have a similar kind of thing around corporate social responsibility, CSR as we call it. And thanks, Jay, for saying that you're not a fan of Pearson at all. 2 thumbs up for you.
I'm agnostic on all vendors, for the record.
Okay. As a consultant, you kind of have to be. So where was I going with that? So yeah, trying to find a pathway. And the thing I see different from the US is that the US is trying to very much standardize. I mean, this is an external view, but standardize and say what's equivalent. Whereas I think in the UK, especially at the moment, which is what I'm most familiar with, people are trying to make sure that they're letting 1,000 badges bloom. And I think that's because we haven't got as much badge activity. You still got lots, but not as much badge activity potentially as in the US. I think it's seen as something over and above existing credentials, whereas I think in the US, it's really in amongst existing credentials, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And that draws on a conversation I think is happening a lot right now that I'd love to get your take on. That's around, you talk about just kind of letting things bloom, at least on the US side, when it does go outside of the kind of walls of a K-12 or higher ed institution to a broader ecosystem that includes employers. One of the first questions that gets asked is around validation and quality of evidence. And I'm curious what you're seeing with that in the UK side of things. And, just personally, I look at that what you talk about, letting it bloom, sort of like, the snowball effect. And, if we want to make snowmen, we first have to have snowflakes turn to snowballs, turn to big things. And I'm kind of the mind that, let's, before we worry too much, let's definitely cheer for high quality, and let's not do so much error correction at the front end that we never get to even build snowmen because we're arguing over what's a good snowman before we even have a snowball.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I wrote a post for the Connected Learning blog. It used to be called DML Central. It's now the Connected Learning Alliance.
CL Alliance.
So if you look for CL Alliance and quality and my name, Doug Belshaw, you'll find this. Basically, that's how I find my stuff.
I love that your blog, that I could blog Google search quality in your name.
Well, I've got an
I'm a little
name.
jealous. I'm worried that if you Google quality and Noah Geisel, it's going to take you to like rateMyTeacher.com. So I'm a little jealous. But sorry, I digress. Sorry to interrupt. Right. And by the way, for anybody who wants to sneak a question, we got 10 minutes left as Doug answers. This will definitely be checking the feed if you want to ask Doug a question.
So three things. I'm just trying to make a note of this because anytime I say to my wife, I'm going to say three things. I say one and then I've forgotten the rest. So first of all, on quality, I think quality is in the eye of the beholder. What counts as quality to me might be different to quality for you. And okay, there are standards body which define qualities, but actually, I think in the crazy wild west of badges, we can have emergent qualities of badges. Where I live in the UK, Oxford University has 900 years head start on badges. It was founded 900 years ago. So that's the first thing I'd say. Quality depends on what you mean in different circumstances. So that takes me into hiring. If I gave you my credentials, so I am Dr. Belshaw, but if I gave you my credentials, you would not recognize some of the universities I've been to. I can pretty much guarantee it. So what do you do in that situation? If you were trying to hire me, what do you do? Do you take those on trust, or do you get in touch with the employer? Now, okay, there are third-party systems which might validate the degree or whatever, fair enough. But leaving those aside, if you're not going to contact the institution, you're just going to take my credentials on trust. Right? In which case, I think that we're back at stage one, and it doesn't matter if you've got equivalencies and all that kind of stuff, because we live in a global marketplace. And the last two jobs I've had, and all the consultancy work I've had, has mainly been outside the UK. So in that case, some of the stuff, the credentials that you have, it doesn't really matter if you level them within your own country or your own state or whatever, because it's a global marketplace. And third, I think that, interestingly, when I started my career in 2003 time, everyone was going all in on e-portfolios. E-portfolios were the thing. And if you think about why they didn't take off so much, it was because you had to go to know his e-portfolio and then watch 15 hours of video, and go through loads of transcripts and stuff. And okay, that was really interesting, but I can't do that for 100 people. Right. I'm hiring. So I feel like we're almost approaching now e-portfolios from the other direction, which is let's make really small little badges and credentials, which are almost like little e-portfolios in their own right. And then let's make sense. I think this is going to be the next thing in badges, especially with the kind of demise of the Mozilla backpack. Basically, places where you can store your badges, which tell a story in a way that you'd want to tell. So it gives you the context of everything. So it's not just a bunch of badges that I'm putting on my platform, not even just a collection, but it tells a story of who I am and how I came to be in this situation and why I'm the perfect pick for your job now.
And I think that let's stay there for a quick moment, and we are in our last 7 minutes here with Doug. We'll definitely be looking to see if anybody poses any last minute questions. But you've mentioned hiring enough times. I'm getting that that's probably a passion of yours as it is of mine. And we definitely see people drawn to this space. Maybe it was through an initial interest in gamification, and all of a sudden badges started popping in their searches. They're like, what are this? Or, different people have a different way of getting here. And so not for everyone is it the employment angle. And for me, that is where I'm passionate about it, that I see this way of, so often we're sitting in rooms where it's people who look a lot like you and me saying, does anybody know anybody who would be good for this? And I look at credentials, digital badge credentials as, a way that helps us on a more merit-based way, build teams and make hires in ways that are blind to things like last name, race, gender. And so what are you really excited about right now as we look at that frontier of the hiring side of digital badge credentials?
Well, badges are really important at moments of transition. So let's say that you're a teacher and you're doing some kind of professional development. Now, you're either doing that professional development to keep your job, or you're doing that professional development because you want a new job, right? Usually, especially in the US. So in that case, you need to prove at a distance that you have done this thing. Now, in some places, I was over in LA last year, they pay teachers to do their professional development. So that's great. I wish I was in that kind of situation. Imagine that, being paid to do professional development. But they're important moments of transition. So I've hired 2 people in the last 6 months. And those people, one of whom applied through the usual channels and went through all the things, but I already knew him from my social networks, and I already knew that he was the right kind of person. Now, you could have taken his experience and his knowledge around new technologies and badged that, and that would have been hugely valuable. But it's trying to get that, trying to make something more tacit that at the moment is a bit kind of touchy-feely and is a bit difficult to know. So yeah, okay, you know someone who might be perfect for this job, and I trust you and I think you're awesome, but I also kind of want to still triangulate that. You're one data point, and that's an important one, but what else can we do? And I think that badges provide a data point. What I'm really excited about with version 2 of the specification is that you can now endorse people. And so what that means is that you can be issued a badge for a specific skill, and you can see the evidence. So the evidence is one data point. Then you can look at the issuer. Let's say it's an expert, an individual, or an organization that you trust. And then you can say, oh, this third party has either endorsed the badge class, which means all of the badges, or the assertion, which means just this particular badge to Noah or whoever, which means that you can almost triangulate within the badge itself. And for me, that is a huge game changer. And it means that when you're hiring someone, that becomes a little e-portfolio in its own right. And I think at the end of the day, money talks, and all of us are going to change jobs at some point in the future. And for me, that's, why did I go into badges? Why was I interested in that? Well, because when my kids get to 18, I don't want them to have to think that they have to go to university or college to get to do what it is that they want to do. Because I see the high school diploma, I see degrees as being this huge proxy for the little skills that we actually want to hire for.
And that's profound stuff. And I do want to go back over one thing you said in our cozy moments, because I think it was really big. You talk about the version 2.0 of the open badge infrastructure and the endorsement piece, and that there's the badge class, which is just anyone who gets this particular badge. That's the badge class, and the badge assertion, which is Doug's version of that, the one that he earned, or the one that Noah earned. And for folks who are listening to, well, a third party can endorse an actual badge assertion. For folks who are thinking, wait, wasn't that like kind of what LinkedIn was doing, but it was a joke? How would you say that you see those going either similarly or differently?
Well, if you go into, so interestingly, LinkedIn brought in endorsements literally 6 months after Open Badges came out. And if Reid Hoffman was on the board of Mozilla when that came out. So let's just connect.
You say coincident.
Yeah, Reid Hoffman is the in charge of LinkedIn. Yeah. Reid Hoffman is no longer on the board of Mozilla.
Massive Scale podcast, if you want to listen to him.
Is he good?
He has some episodes are really good.
Okay.
The episode about the woman who founded Dress for Success is definitely an episode that I would recommend.
So you asked about endorsements within LinkedIn. Now, one of my former colleagues at Mozilla, he used to put all kinds of crazy stuff on his profile and try and get people to endorse him because he just thought it was ridiculous.
It was a creative writing. I would make up just as a creative writing exercise, endorsements for other people.
Right, but how do you validate whether the person who's choosing to endorse you actually knows anything about the thing itself?
Yeah.
So I've had people endorse me who have no knowledge of whether I can be good at that thing itself. So for example, I've had people endorse me for instructional design who cannot know whether I'm good at instructional design because they have never seen anything like that I've done,
right.
That kind of thing. The second thing to say is that if you try and take your endorsements out of LinkedIn, you can't do that. It's not portable. Yeah, it's a silo. And the thing which excites me about Open Badges still, even though it's effectively a metadata standard, is that your badges are portable. You can take them wherever you want. And if your badge provider shuts down or whatever, it's still based on a standard. And for me, who spent my entire life working in open source, that for me, you get to choose when you stop using something. We've all had the situation where something which we've known and loved, oh, we're going to shut this down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas with open source, you get to decide when it's shut down. Because even if the main people are developing it shut down, you can self-organize with the community to keep it going because all of the code's open source, and it's the same with open standards and protocols. So I don't think you should ever build your infrastructure, and I think schools are particularly guilty of doing this because of cost reasons, build your infrastructure on top of something which could go away tomorrow.
Folks, this is Doug Belshaw. You can follow him at DAJ Belshaw on the Twitter, as well as Mastodon.
Mastodon.social/@DAJ-Belshaw.
Perfect. And just so you know, and it's like 3 a.m. his time right now. He was on a plane yesterday from Europe, and he's this smart even with jet lag. So imagine what he's like if you go find him on the other side of the pond. Doug, thank you so much for taking time to be with us this afternoon. Thanks for folks who watched live, folks who watched this asynchronously. We appreciate and value you for your engagement, and we'll see you next week on #BadgeChat. Thanks, everybody.